The night was calm, but the city lights whispered secrets that no one was supposed to hear. A soft rain had fallen earlier, leaving the streets glowing under yellow lamps. In a quiet corner of Los Angeles, Keanu Reeves sat in his car outside a small jazz bar he loved. The windows were fogged slightly, and the low hum of a saxophone drifted through the walls. This bar was their place. It was where he and Sandra Bullock had shared stories no one else knew, where laughter had often turned into long silences filled with comfort. Tonight he waited, fingers tapping the steering wheel, heart carrying a quiet hope that she would walk through those doors and smile at him like she always did. But inside the bar, Sandra was already there, sitting at a shadowed table near the back. Her hair fell softly around her face as she sipped a glass of sparkling water. She wasn't alone. Across from her sat a man Keanu didn't recognize, an older photographer known for his charity work. Their conversation looked gentle but private, the kind of talk that carried weight. Sandra's laugh was quiet, but her eyes carried something heavy. She wasn't dressed for attention, just a simple sweater and jeans, yet she seemed to glow under the dim lights. People at nearby tables noticed her, but they respected her space. Still, whispers floated like smoke. Wasn't that Sandra Bullock? Who was the man with her? Keanu stepped inside, pulling his hood low. He wanted to surprise her, maybe share a late meal, maybe tell her about the small group of kids he'd helped at a local shelter earlier. He believed tonight would be one of those easy nights where kindness and friendship filled the air. But when he saw her with someone else, his breath caught. It wasn't jealousy at first, it was confusion. Sandra had told him she was spending the evening quietly at home. Now she was here, in their spot, her hand briefly touching the stranger's wrist in a gesture of comfort. The music swelled, a slow and aching melody. Keanu stayed near the door, torn between walking out and walking over. His mind replayed every moment they had shared, the late-night drives when they were both too restless to sleep, the way she once waited outside his trailer for hours just to check if he was okay after a bad day, the gentle way she always reminded him to drink water during long shoots. His heart was tender, and seeing her like this made it ache in a way he hadn't expected. Sandra noticed him. For a brief second, her eyes widened. Surprise, guilt, and something softer flickered across her face. She gave the smallest shake of her head as if to say not now. The man across from her glanced over, sensing the shift, but said nothing. Keanu forced a small smile, the kind of smile people use when they're trying not to let their hearts crack. He backed out quietly, the door closing with a soft thud. Outside, the air felt heavier. The rain had started again, gentle drops falling on the sidewalk, blurring the lights of the city. As Keanu walked back to his car, memories wrapped around him. He remembered the first time Sandra trusted him enough to share her fears. The night she admitted she sometimes felt invisible despite her fame. He remembered promising her that kindness would always be their anchor. Tonight, though, he felt unanchored, adrift in a storm of questions. Was this secret night out just a friendly meeting? Or was there something deeper she couldn't tell him yet? He didn't drive away immediately. He sat there, watching through the rain-speckled glass as shadows moved behind the bar's curtains. A small part of him wanted to march back in to demand answers, but another part, the part that respected her, told him to wait. Respect was something they had built their bond on. He would not destroy that with anger. Yet under the quiet hum of the car engine, a single tear slid down his cheek. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was the fear of losing something rare, a friendship shaped by humility, resilience, and kindness. Hours later, the streets emptied, but the questions stayed loud. Somewhere in the city, Sandra left the bar quietly, her expression unreadable. She walked alone for a while, clutching her phone, replaying the moment she saw Keanu at the door. She whispered to herself, almost too softly to hear, "Please trust me, Keanu. You don't know the whole story yet." The next morning, Los Angeles woke under a pale sky streaked with gold, but for Keanu, the sunrise felt dim. He had barely slept. The sound of rain tapping against his apartment window had blended with the memory of Sandra's startled eyes. As the city stretched awake, his phone buzzed with routine messages, studio updates, charity invitations, reminders about meetings, but none were from her. Each vibration felt like a small crack in the silence between them. Keanu brewed coffee but barely touched it. He kept staring at the steam curling upward, wondering if trust could dissolve as quickly as heat from a cup. Far across town, Sandra sat cross-legged on her living room floor, her hair messy, her mind racing. A photograph lay on the table, a young girl smiling shyly, clutching a worn sketchbook. The man she'd met last night, the photographer, had given her this photo. He had told her about a community project for homeless youth who dreamed of art, but had no supplies. The meeting was supposed to stay quiet until they could reveal the plan publicly. She had agreed to keep it secret to protect the kids' privacy. She never imagined Keanu would walk in, see her like that, and leave without asking. Guilt pressed on her chest. She typed his name into her phone, her thumb hovering over the call button, but she couldn't press it yet. How could she explain when she had promised silence? Keanu decided to go for a ride on his motorcycle, hoping the wind would clear his head. As the city blurred by, he remembered the way Sandra had always been honest with him. The memory of her laugh at a charity event flickered, a laugh so genuine it silenced a room. He wanted to believe there was an explanation, but the image of her hand touching the stranger's wrist replayed again and again. The more he tried to dismiss it, the more it dug into him. When he stopped at a red light, a young boy at the crosswalk dropped his backpack. Keanu hopped off, picked it up, and returned it with a kind smile. The boy's eyes lit up, and for a moment, the ache in Keanu's chest softened. Kindness always mattered. That was what Sandra had taught him, too. So why did this feel like betrayal? That evening, Sandra attended a small charity dinner that Keanu had planned to skip. He couldn't face her yet, but fate seemed unwilling to let them drift apart quietly. She spoke with volunteers and listened to their stories, her smile genuine but her thoughts far away. Outside, Keanu stood under a streetlight, debating whether to go in. A gust of wind carried laughter from inside. Her laughter. He almost turned away, but an elderly volunteer spotted him and waved. He couldn't ignore kindness. He walked in, nodding to familiar faces, feeling the weight of curious glances. People sensed tension between them, even if they didn't know the reason. Their eyes met across the room. The world seemed to pause. Sandra's breath caught. Keanu's heart stumbled. She excused herself from the group and approached him. For a moment, neither spoke. The clinking of glasses and soft music filled the gap between them. Finally, she said, her voice low and gentle, "You weren't supposed to see that." Keanu swallowed, trying to keep his tone steady. "Then help me understand what I did see." Before she could answer, a sudden commotion erupted near the entrance. A teenage boy had fainted, overwhelmed by nerves and hunger. He was one of the young artists the charity supported. Without hesitation, Sandra rushed to help, and Keanu followed. Together, they carried the boy to a chair, asked for water, and spoke soothing words. The boy's eyes fluttered open, and in that moment, Keanu saw again the Sandra he knew, the woman who cared deeply, the woman whose hands trembled when she saw someone in pain. The room buzzed with whispers, two stars helping quietly. No cameras, no drama, just kindness. After the boy was safe, Sandra led Keanu outside to a quieter corner under the stars. She handed him a folded paper, a list of names and sketches. "These are kids," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "They're the reason I was there last night. The man you saw is building something for them. I promised to keep it quiet because they're scared of losing what little hope they have." Her eyes glistened. "I couldn't tell you yet. I thought I was protecting them." Keanu looked at the paper, his heart twisting. The names, the simple sketches, they spoke of dreams too fragile to expose to the world too soon. Shame and relief washed over him at once. But pain lingered too, the pain of feeling left out, even for a noble reason. "You could have trusted me," he whispered. Sandra's lips trembled. "I do trust you. But sometimes protecting kindness means holding silence, even from people you love." A siren wailed somewhere in the distance, echoing their unspoken emotions. Keanu sighed, the anger slipping away but leaving a hollow ache. "I want to believe you," he said softly. Sandra reached out, her fingers brushing his arm. "Then believe the woman you've known all these years. Believe the laughter we shared, the nights we stayed up talking about hope. Don't let one moment erase all of that." Keanu closed his eyes briefly. the memory of her steady friendship flashing before him. Something inside him shifted, but the wound was not yet healed. As they stood under the faint glow of the streetlight, a sudden flash from a distance startled them. A paparazzi camera. Someone had followed them outside. The click of the shutter sent a chill through Sandra. She realized the headlines could twist this into gossip, ruining the quiet project meant to protect the children. Keanu instinctively stepped closer, shielding her from view, his protective nature overpowering his hurt. But he also knew this would not be the last twist the world would throw at them. Beneath the city's hum, a storm of rumors and misunderstandings was already gathering, waiting to test their resilience, their humility, and their kindness once again. The next morning began with a sharp knock on Sandra's front door. Just as the sun painted soft pink lines across the sky, she hesitated before opening it, her heart already heavy from the night before. On the porch stood Maya, a young volunteer from the charity dinner. Her eyes were wide, her voice trembling. "There are photos online," she whispered, holding out her phone. Sandra's stomach dropped. The screen showed a blurry shot of her and Keanu outside the dinner, her hand near his arm, his face serious. The headline screamed speculation, secret argument between Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves, trouble in paradise. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the world's curiosity pressing against a story too tender to share. Meanwhile, Keanu sat alone in his kitchen, scrolling through the same images. His phone buzzed endlessly. Messages from friends, reporters, even fans asking if something had gone wrong. He ignored them all. Instead, he stared at an old photo pinned to his fridge. Him and Sandra laughing on the set of their first movie together years ago. They had been younger, freer, untouched by the noise that fame could bring. He missed those days. He missed simplicity. The questions gnawed at him. Would their quiet friendship survive the storm? Or would whispers and headlines erase years of kindness between them? By noon, the story had spread across entertainment sites and social media. Hashtags trended and strangers crafted theories. Some defended them, saying their bond was stronger than gossip. Others speculated cruelly, suggesting betrayal and broken promises. Sandra watched the comments scroll by, her chest tight. She thought of the kids the charity was protecting, and fear rose like a tide. What if this attention scared them away? What if the man she'd met, the photographer, decided the project was no longer safe? She grabbed her keys and drove across town to the community center where the children gathered, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Inside the center, the photographer waited, his hands folded, his face stern but calm. "The photos are everywhere," he said softly when she entered. "Some of the kids are frightened. They don't understand." Sandra's voice cracked. "I'll fix this," she said. "I don't know how yet, but I will." Just then, a small voice came from behind a row of chairs. A boy named Lucas, maybe 12 years old, stepped forward, clutching his sketchbook. "Is it true, Miss Sandra?" he asked quietly. "Are people angry at you and Mr. Keanu?" Sandra knelt down to meet his eyes. "People like to make noise when they don't understand," she said gently. "But the truth hasn't changed. We still care about you, and we're still here." Keanu arrived moments later, surprising everyone. He walked in quietly, carrying a bag of art supplies. The children gasped when they saw him. He was a familiar face from movies, but here he was, real, standing among them. Without a word, he began handing out the supplies: pencils, sketch pads, brushes. Lucas looked at him, his eyes brightening. "You're not mad at Miss Sandra?" the boy asked. Keanu smiled faintly, the kind of smile that holds sadness and hope at once. "No, kid," he said softly. "Real friends don't give up that easily." Those words were like a small light in the room, cutting through the whispers outside. After the children settled to draw, Sandra and Keanu stepped outside into the afternoon sun. The air was crisp, and the sound of distant traffic filled the silence between them. "You didn't have to come," she said quietly. "I did," he replied. "Because this isn't about me. It's about them, but—" He paused, looking out toward the horizon. "It still hurts, Sandra. Not because I don't trust you, but because trust feels fragile when it's left in the dark." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I thought I was protecting you," she whispered. But maybe I was protecting myself too. I was afraid that if I told you, the weight would be too much for both of us. Keanu's jaw tightened. But there was no anger, only sadness and a flicker of understanding. A sudden honk from the street broke the moment. A black sedan had pulled up across the road, and a man stepped out with a camera. Then another. Paparazzi had found them again. The photographer from the charity rushed outside, warning them that the attention could put the kids at risk. Sandra's heart pounded. If the children's faces appeared online, their fragile sense of safety could shatter. Keanu acted quickly, moving to block the view, his broad shoulders shielding the center's entrance. "Go back inside," he urged her. But Sandra shook her head. "No. We face this together." Her voice was steady now, her fear melting into resolve. Later that evening, Keanu drove Sandra back to her house. The car ride was quiet, but not cold. The city lights blurred outside the windows like streaks of memory. When they reached her driveway, she turned to him. "Do you ever feel like the world is watching, just waiting for us to break?" she asked. Keanu's hand stayed on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed forward. "All the time," he said. "But breaking isn't the same as bending. We can bend, Sandra. We can bend without breaking." His words hung in the air, soft but strong. As he left, Sandra stood on her porch, the cool night air brushing against her skin. She looked up at the stars, their faint glow barely visible against the city's brightness. She whispered to herself, "Bend, don't break." Inside her house, her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from an unknown number. "Stop the project, or the kids' names go public." Her blood ran cold. It wasn't just gossip now, it was a threat. Somewhere in the city, someone had turned their kindness into a weapon. She sank onto her couch, clutching her phone, her heart pounding. The storm had only begun, and the next twist would test not only her friendship with Keanu, but their resilience, humility, and the quiet kindness they had promised to protect. Night crept across Los Angeles with a sharp wind that rattled window panes and carried distant sirens through the streets. Inside her quiet house, Sandra sat on the floor near the coffee table, staring at the threatening text again. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reread the words, "Stop the project or the kids' names go public." Fear wasn't new to her. She had faced harsh headlines and judgment before. But this was different. This wasn't about her image. This was about children who had already seen too much pain. Her mind raced with questions. Who would send this? Was it someone tied to the project? Or a stranger hoping to destroy something good for their own gain? She thought about calling Keanu but hesitated. He had already endured enough heartbreak these past days. Yet, she also knew that if anyone could help her face this, it was him. She typed his name on her phone screen, paused, then pressed call. His voice, calm but tired, answered on the second ring. "Sandra," he said softly. She took a breath. "There's something you need to see." "Can you come?" Within 30 minutes, he was at her door, his motorcycle helmet tucked under his arm, his brow furrowed with concern. She handed him the phone without a word. He read the message slowly, his jaw tightening. "This isn't just gossip anymore," he murmured. "Someone wants to hurt them." They sat on her couch, the quiet between them heavy but not empty. Keanu finally spoke. "We can't give in. If we back down, whoever this is will know they can control the story with fear." Sandra nodded, her voice low. "But we also can't risk the kids being exposed." She looked into his eyes, searching for strength. "What do we do?" Keanu leaned forward, elbows on his knees, thinking. "We find out who's behind this, and we protect them, even if it means standing in the storm." The next day, Sandra arranged to meet the photographer at a small, discreet cafe. Keanu insisted on coming with her, quietly taking a table nearby where he could watch without drawing attention. The photographer's face was drawn and serious. "I've been doing charity work for years," he said, "but I've never seen anyone threaten children like this." He handed her a small envelope. Inside were printed screenshots, comments and rumors spreading online that someone was offering to sell private information about the project. Sandra's chest tightened as she scanned the pages. "They're not even thinking about the kids as people," she whispered. "They're just headlines to them." A voice interrupted their conversation. "Maybe they don't need headlines. Maybe they need a bigger story." A woman at a nearby table, an investigative journalist Sandra had met years ago, had overheard. She approached cautiously. "If you go public on your own terms," the journalist said softly, "you can control the narrative before someone else twists it." Sandra exchanged a glance with Keanu. Going public now could backfire. It could also save the project. It was a dangerous choice, and danger was exactly what she wanted to avoid for the children. Later that evening, Sandra and Keanu drove to the community center. The kids were gathered in a small circle, drawing quietly. Lucas looked up and smiled when he saw them. The sight of their fragile hope broke something inside Sandra. She knelt next to Lucas and handed him a new set of markers. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "your dreams are safe." But even as she said the words, doubt gnawed at her. Outside the window, a car idled a little too long before driving off. Keanu noticed. His instincts told him someone was watching. They stayed late at the center, helping the kids pack up their artwork and lock up the doors. As they left, the photographer received another text, this time a photo of the center taken just moments ago. Someone was tracking them. Sandra's breath hitched. Keanu put a hand on her shoulder. "Stay calm," he said quietly. "Fear is what they want." But even he felt a ripple of unease. The following afternoon, rumors grew louder online. Fabricated stories suggested Sandra and Keanu were using the charity for publicity. Trolls accused them of hypocrisy. But among the noise, a single message arrived anonymously to Keanu's email. "Meet me tonight at the old warehouse on Grant Street if you want the truth." It felt like a trap. It also felt like their only lead. Sandra argued against going. "It could be dangerous," she said. Keanu shook his head. "We can't fight shadows forever. If there's even a chance to stop this, we have to try." After a long pause, Sandra agreed, but only if she could go too. Night fell hard and fast. The warehouse on Grant Street loomed like a sleeping giant under a flickering streetlight. Broken windows lined the upper floors and graffiti marked the walls. They parked a block away and approached on foot, their breaths visible in the cold air. Each creak of the wooden floor beneath their boots echoed too loud. Inside, the vast space was empty except for the sound of dripping water somewhere in the distance. A single light bulb swung slightly overhead, casting long, restless shadows. Then a voice emerged from the darkness. "You're braver than I thought." A man stepped forward, his face partially hidden by a hood. He held up a phone displaying the photos and threats. "You want to know who's behind this? It's bigger than you think." Sandra's heart pounded. Keanu stayed close, his body tense. "Why target kids?" he demanded. The man's laugh was bitter. "Because kindness scares people who profit from cruelty, and you two, whether you realize it or not, just became dangerous to them." Before they could ask more, a loud crash echoed from deeper inside the warehouse, followed by footsteps running away. The hooded man glanced back, then bolted into the shadows. By the time Keanu chased after him, he was gone. Left in the flickering light, Sandra felt her legs weaken. "This is spiraling," she whispered. Keanu returned, frustrated but determined. "It's not over," he said, his voice low but steady. "Whoever they are, they're afraid. And fear means we're closer to the truth." Outside, the city seemed quieter than usual, as if holding its breath for what would come next. Sandra looked at Keanu, her chest tight with a mix of fear and admiration. In that moment, she realized their bond wasn't just friendship or loyalty. It was resilience born from years of shared kindness. But resilience would be tested even further, and neither of them knew how dangerous the next twist would be. The following day dawned bright, but the city felt uneasy, as if the air itself sensed the storm building around Sandra and Keanu. Sandra sat on her porch with a cup of tea that had long gone cold. She hadn't slept. The warehouse meeting haunted her. The hooded man's words echoed like a riddle. Kindness scares those who profit from cruelty. Her phone buzzed with news alerts about more speculation online. Strangers dissected her friendship with Keanu, twisting it into a spectacle. A pang of guilt pressed against her heart. This wasn't supposed to happen. She had wanted to help quietly, not create chaos. Across town, Keanu was already awake, pacing his small living room. The shadows on the walls looked sharper, as if even the morning sun couldn't soften them. His instincts as someone who valued trust told him they were walking into something bigger than rumors. He scrolled through messages from friends urging him to ignore the noise, but he couldn't. He thought of the children, of Lucas and his sketchbook, and of Sandra's quiet strength. Letting fear win wasn't an option. Later that afternoon, Sandra called Keanu to meet at the community center again. When he arrived, she was already there speaking softly with Lucas and the other kids. The walls were decorated with their drawings, bright colors against dull paint. She watched the kids laugh and felt a surge of determination. "We can't let them destroy this," she whispered when Keanu approached. He nodded. "Then we fight back. But we do it our way, with respect and honesty." As evening approached, the photographer arrived with new information. He had traced the threatening messages to a burner phone used near a local media company notorious for exploiting vulnerable stories. It wasn't proof, but it was a lead. Sandra's hands shook slightly as she held the printouts. "If this leaks," she said, her voice trembling, "the kids could disappear from the program. They'll be too scared." Keanu placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Then we give people something true and powerful, something no rumor can compete with." They decided to host a small, unannounced gathering at the center, inviting only trusted friends and a few quiet journalists with reputations for fairness. The goal was to reveal the charity's purpose on their own terms. As the sun set, casting warm light through the dusty windows, Sandra helped Lucas pin his latest drawing on the wall. It was of two figures standing together under storm clouds, holding up a fragile shelter for others. She felt tears prick her eyes. "You captured this perfectly," she told him. Lucas smiled shyly. "I drew you and Mr. Keanu." But outside the center, a black van parked across the street, its windows tinted. Keanu noticed it while carrying boxes of art supplies inside. His stomach tightened. He recognized the feeling of being watched. As he closed the door, his phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. "Back off or the next photo goes viral." His jaw clenched. He didn't tell Sandra immediately. He didn't want to add to her fear, but the weight of it sat heavy on him. Inside, the gathering began quietly. A few journalists took notes as Sandra spoke about the importance of creating safe spaces for kids who had been forgotten. Her voice was steady but full of emotion. Keanu stood nearby, watching the way her words softened even the most skeptical faces. For a moment, it felt like hope was winning. Then, a loud bang from outside shattered the calm. The lights flickered. Someone shouted. Sandra's heart leapt into her throat. Keanu rushed toward the door, flinging it open to find a brick on the sidewalk with a note tied to it. "Last warning." The kids inside started crying, their fragile sense of safety breaking. Sandra knelt down, her arms wrapping around Lucas. "You're safe," she whispered, even as her own fear surged. Keanu's mind raced. Whoever was behind this wasn't just trying to scare them. They wanted control, and control was something he would not surrender. He called a trusted friend from a security firm to quietly watch the center that night. He didn't want more panic, but he knew they needed protection. As the guests left, one of the journalists stayed behind. She was older, with kind eyes but a sharp mind. She approached Sandra and Keanu quietly. "You're making enemies by doing good," she said. "But sometimes the only way to expose cruelty is to shine a brighter light." She handed them her card. "Let me help you tell the truth." Later, Sandra and Keanu sat on the center's steps under the night sky, the city's glow dim in the distance. "Do you ever wonder if kindness is enough?" Sandra asked softly. Keanu gazed upward at the stars. "Kindness isn't about winning," he said. "It's about refusing to become what we're fighting against." She rested her head briefly on his shoulder, the simple gesture bridging the distance that had grown between them. A sudden vibration broke the quiet. Keanu's phone again. He opened the message and felt his blood run cold. It was a picture taken through the center's window, showing Sandra hugging Lucas just moments ago. Below it, the words, "Tomorrow, everyone will see what you're hiding." Keanu showed her the screen, and her breath caught. The stakes had just risen. The next move would decide whether the truth survived, or whether fear would crush it all. The next morning arrived with a strange stillness, as if the city was holding its breath. Sandra stood by her window watching the sunlight spill over the skyline, but her chest felt heavy. The threat from the night before replayed in her mind over and over. She whispered quietly to herself, "Don't let them win." Across town, Keanu prepared for a meeting with the photographer and the journalist who had offered help. He slid on his worn leather jacket, his movements slow but deliberate. He wasn't just protecting a project now, he was protecting hope itself. At the community center, the photographer had set up a small display of the children's drawings. Hoping to remind everyone why they were fighting, Lucas arrived early, clutching his sketchbook to his chest. He noticed the tension on Sandra's face and walked up to her. "Are we still safe?" he asked, his voice small. Sandra knelt to his level and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You are," she said firmly, "and we'll make sure it stays that way." Though her words were steady, her heart pounded with worry. Keanu arrived with the journalist, who carried a small camera and a notebook. "If they're going to leak something," she said quietly, "then we need to get ahead of it. We go live. You tell the world what's really happening, why this project matters." Sandra's stomach twisted at the thought of stepping into a public storm. But when she looked at Lucas and the other kids quietly drawing, her fear melted into resolve. "Let's do it," she whispered. They set up a simple live stream. No stage lights, no glamour. Just the community center's faded walls and the children's art. When the stream went live, Sandra spoke first. Her voice trembled at the beginning, but grew stronger with each word. She told the story of forgotten children who needed safe places to dream. She explained that the meeting with the photographer had been to protect those dreams, not to hide betrayal or chase publicity. Her honesty carried weight that no headline could distort. Keanu stepped forward next, his deep voice calm and steady. "The world doesn't need more noise," he said. "It needs more quiet acts of kindness that ask for nothing in return." As the live stream unfolded, comments began pouring in. Some were skeptical at first, but then Lucas shyly stepped into the frame, holding up his drawing of two figures shielding others from the storm. "Miss Sandra and Mr. Keanu helped me," he said softly. "Please don't be mean to them. They're trying to help us." The room went silent for a heartbeat before the comments shifted. Support flooded in from around the world. People began offering donations, supplies, and messages of encouragement. Hashtags started trending, not of gossip or scandal, but of hope. But just as relief began to settle in, a notification popped up on the live stream. An anonymous account posted the threatening photo again, attempting to stir doubt. The journalist acted quickly. She traced the account and found evidence linking it directly to the media company suspected of exploiting vulnerable stories. She held up her phone to the camera and said, "This is what cruelty looks like, someone willing to harm children to sell a headline." The moment was powerful. The company's reputation began to crumble in real time as viewers flooded their pages with outrage. Hours later, the black van that had been watching the center was gone. Outside, a few local reporters arrived, not to attack, but to amplify the truth. They spoke with the photographer and quietly thanked Sandra and Keanu for their transparency. Donations doubled by evening, and volunteers from across the city began arriving at the center with boxes of art supplies, food, and blankets. The threat that had loomed over them was fading, not because it disappeared, but because it was drowned out by collective kindness. That night, when the center had emptied and the city had quieted, Sandra and Keanu stood together on the steps under a sky scattered with stars. The air was cool and the world finally felt still. Keanu broke the silence. "We bent," he said softly, "but we didn't break." Sandra let out a shaky laugh, tears glimmering in her eyes. "And we didn't let fear write the story." She glanced at him, her heart full. "Thank you for not walking away." Keanu's lips curved into a small, tender smile. "Thank you for reminding me why kindness matters." Lucas's drawing now hung in the center's front window, visible from the street, a simple reminder that even under storm clouds, there are people willing to hold up the fragile shelter of hope. In the days that followed, the project grew stronger than ever. The rumors faded, but the lessons remained. Respect had held them together when anger could have torn them apart. Humility had reminded them to listen instead of accuse. Resilience had carried them through the darkest hours, and kindness, quiet, steady kindness, had won. As they walked to their cars, Sandra turned back for one last look at the glowing window. She whispered into the night, "Every act of kindness leaves a light." Keanu, hearing her, nodded silently. The city around them hummed with life, unaware of the storm that had passed. But for them, the world felt a little brighter, a little softer, and a lot more worth protecting.